Hey, and welcome back. Today's video is going to be a project, like many others I've posted on my channel, of trying to use up some of these orphan drum shells and parts that I have in my storage room to either use for something in the real world or move on to someone else who can use them. So back at the end of 2024, I was able to collaborate with Nordic Drum Shells on building myself a new drum set, and it turned out great. And in addition to the shells they sent me all the cutoffs to use for future projects, I guess, which was really thoughtful of them. But I ended up having a 20-inch cutoff, a 14-inch cutoff, and a 12-inch cutoff, all of various depths, and it's time to start tackling these shells and build a drum out of them. So this is the first one I'm going to start with. It's the 20-inch bass drum shell. I don't know how deep it is. Let me measure it quick. It's about 8 3/4 inch deep. I think that'll work good for a skinny kick drum. And honestly, I've been wanting another skinny kick drum to use in like a two-piece setup where I'm playing just like singer-songwriter music or at a farmer's market and I don't have a lot of space. And even though my other drums that I've built kind of fit that bill, I don't have anything that's really specific for that one task. This shell looks pretty good. One of the edges is really clean and the other one is a little bit imperfect. So I'm gonna trim off maybe a 1/4 inch and we'll be left with 8.5 inches. Ideally, I don't want to spend any money on this project because I just got through my tax season and it was a bit rough this year. So I'm gonna try to keep this budget pretty low if possible, but I need lugs, hoops, tension rods, claws, and some sort of spur setup for this. So I'm gonna go back in my storage room and see if I can find some orphan pieces to use and hopefully not have to buy anything for this. All right, I think I found almost everything I need. So to start, I've got these two 20-inch bass drum hoops from a previous drum I built. They're in pretty good shape, and I actually had them thrown on my other walnut drum and thought they looked really nice, so I think these will be great. I have my box of bass claws here, and I believe I have 16 of one kind of them, so they'll all match, and they're these diamond or triangular shaped ones. I think those will be fine. For lugs, I have a few different options. I actually had a bunch of Yamaha bass drum lugs from the donor shell that I bought to use the spurs and tom mount from on the walnut kit. But I also have like 20 of these old Ludwig super classic lugs. I think that's what they're called. But I think these look nice and they're not so deep that they would protrude through the shell's thickness. So these should work fine. And I like the way they look a little more. And from just doing a quick survey of my tension rods, I have plenty of like 3.5, 3 3/4 inch tension rods. So I think I'll be good if I do a conventional spacing from the edge. So that's almost everything except the spurs. Now I do have these spur legs. These are the kind of vintage style, which I really don't like in terms of efficiency and ease of use on my gigging drums. But on a drum this shallow, you kind of have to use something like this as opposed to the ones that fold up because they'll just stick past the drum shell. These will work good, but I don't have tom mounts for them, which is what you need to secure them on the shell. I went over to Amazon and I found some Gibraltar tom mounts that fit this thickness, which is like 9.5 millimeters, and they were like 10 bucks a piece. If I could get out of this project for 20 bucks and free 2-day shipping, I think that's a worthy investment. After I made my way upstairs, I pulled out the table saw to cut this drum down by a 1/4 inch. I've done this sort of thing dozens of times, so I don't get too worried about anything going wrong, but I will say it's probably time to change this blade out. I checked the edges on my granite slab, and then took this drum over to the workbench to sand up to 180 grit, just to open up the wood and allow it to better absorb the polyurethane. Over the rest of the afternoon and evening, I came back up into the garage to do thin coats of high gloss polyurethane, and in the end, that added up to about 5 coats. I wasn't looking for anything too glassy in appearance, but I like the way that it lets the wood grain pop out and really be the star of the show. After letting it sit overnight to fully dry and cure, I came back out the next morning to cut the bearing edges. Most of the drums I cut, I do 45-degree edges because I like the detail it gets from a drum, but with this being a bass drum and looking for a warmer sound, I went with round over edges on both sides. I was able to do the outside edge in one pass with a very slight cut, but when it came to the inside, I did a deeper cut, gradually working my way up over 3 passes around the edge. And before bringing this shell back downstairs, I quickly went over the fresh cut edges with the sanding block just to smooth them out a bit. With all the dirty work done, I then brought this drum back downstairs to drill everything out and attach hardware. I have a layout mat that I've mounted to a Lazy Susan wheel to make this really easy when it comes to marking all the vertical lug lines across the depth of the shell. I then came back with a combination square to mark all the exact hole locations for each of the 2 lug holes for all 16 lugs being mounted to this shell. Before I took my drill and actually drilled all these holes out, I made sure to use a punch to start each hole, and that keeps my drill bit from drifting at all, but after that, it was pretty much rinse and repeat for all 32 holes I needed to drill out for the lugs. I brought this drum back over to my workbench to hand fasten all the screws and lugs, and I very quickly learned that the original screws must have been for a thicker shell, since I couldn't get them to press tightly before they would bottom out. Luckily, I was able to get some shorter replacement screws from my local hardware store, so we'll have to add another $12 to the total on this drum. A few hours later, my tom brackets arrived from Amazon, and I could open them up and get a plan for where I could mount these onto the shell. It took some trial and error, but after I had it all laid out, I could drill holes for each bracket and then fasten on the screws to secure them in place. I also took this time to quickly drill out a vent hole, since I planned on this drum having a solid front head and wanting some place for the air inside to escape while playing. Once I had that grommet secured onto the shell, I was then able to add some heads and tune everything up. I decided to go with an Aquarian modern vintage head on the batter side and a Remo fiber skin with a felt strip on the reso. I'll probably have to mess around with this combo of heads and dampening, but to start, I thought I'd give this a go. Alright, so I've got the drum right here with me, and I think this project turned out pretty good. I think when you factor in this was a leftovers drum, from the shell, to the lugs, to the hoops, claws, and even the heads, the results are pretty great. I did spend a little over $30 to get these brackets for the spurs, and to get the screws to get all the lugs secured to the shell, and that's worthwhile. That's not much money to have invested into a drum like this. And unlike a lot of my other projects, I think I'm actually going to hang on to this one and plan on using it for certain applications. A lot of times I do recordings out here with just like kick and snare for like indie singer-songwriter stuff, and I don't want to break down my kit or grab a different drum and put different heads on it if I don't want the porthole, so I think I'll leave this one set up for those applications. And then I could see myself using it on some of those smaller gigs where I only need like a micro kit. I have a gig tomorrow night where I'm planning on using this. It's with a men's choir. Again, one of those settings where the drum parts aren't that exciting, so I don't really need toms or anything like that, and this is going to be great, I'm sure. I hope this video was enjoyable and entertaining for all of you out there who made it to the end, and leave me a comment and let me know what you think of this and what you want to see next. Alright, thanks.